From the swaying Captain Jack Sparrow on the high seas to his darker, more complex roles, Johnny Depp didn't just reach the pinnacle of Hollywood, he became a face admired around the world with a cinematic legacy spanning more than 4 decades. But what few people know is that there was a time when Johnny had nowhere to go but the backseat of a friend's car. Years later, he would own a sprawling multi-million-dollar estate in the south of France. Yet, even at the height of success, Johnny found himself caught in waves of controversy, his highly publicized divorce from Amber Heard, years of legal battles, and a personal life relentlessly torn apart in the headlines. So why do people still find it impossible to look away, whether in admiration or debate? Perhaps it's because Johnny Depp never tried to be what the public expected him to be. And it's that very imperfection that has made his journey one of the most compelling chapters in Hollywood history. Life, wealth, and resilience. Beyond it all. Johnny Depp is more than a movie star. He is a life story with all its shadows and light, marked by a spirit that refuses to be extinguished. If you enjoy stories like these, please remember to hit the like button. It truly helps us a lot, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. A young boy once curled up in the backseat of a friend's car, clutching an old guitar, just trying to forget the feeling of being left behind by the world. A few years later, that same face would appear on movie screens across America. Johnny Depp was born in Owensboro, Kentucky in 1963. He came from a struggling working-class family, 4 mouths to feed, moving from one rented house to another more than 20 times in just a decade. They never went hungry, but Johnny's childhood was filled with cold nights, the kind of cold that seeps up from the floor, sneaks through thin window panes, and lingers in the distance between people living under the same roof. At school, Johnny was seen as the odd child, the one who doodled aimlessly in his notebooks, his eyes always drifting out the window. No one could have guessed that inside that quiet boy was a world far larger than anyone around him could imagine. His mother scraping together what little she had bought Johnny, a used guitar, no wrapping paper, no ribbon, just a simple gift. In that chilly rented room, Johnny spent hours teaching himself to play, listening to Bob Dylan cassettes, copying lyrics into a worn notebook. Each note became a brick in the only home he truly had. But loneliness is not so easily erased. By age 11, Johnny first turned to painkillers. By 14, he had fallen into the dangerous spiral of substance abuse, searching for a way out of an emptiness too deep to name. At 15, after a fierce argument at home, the breaking point came. Johnny shouted, "I can't live like this anymore." That night, he left home taking only his battered guitar and a few cigarettes tucked into his shirt pocket. There was nowhere to go. He laid down across the back seat of an old car, using his jacket for a pillow, his breath fogging up the glass. It wasn't just the first freezing night. It was the night Johnny made a choice to either fall for good or to fight for a way out. A boy who once fell asleep holding a guitar in the back of a cold car would one day become a global cinematic icon. But how? That journey was stranger and more extraordinary than even Johnny Depp's most legendary roles. After that night sleeping in a friend's car, Johnny Depp didn't wake up the next morning a star. What waited for him instead were years of near invisibility on the streets of Los Angeles, a city where no one had the time to notice an unfamiliar face. When Johnny arrived in Los Angeles in the early 1980s, few believed he would do much more than just survive. By day, he sold ballpoint pens over the phone. By night, he played music in bars and slept on friends' sofas wherever he could find space. One day, he looked in the mirror, thin, tired, drained of hope, and decided to buy a ticket back to Florida. The ticket was already in his hand, but that night, Johnny tore it up. It wasn't time to give up, he said simply, quietly. Not long afterward, through a recommendation from Nicolas Cage, Johnny landed an audition for A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984. He had no formal acting experience, but director Wes Craven cast him not because of training, but because Craven's daughter said there was something different about him. Johnny earned $200 for that first role, a teenager swallowed by his own bed. It was a small part, but it opened the first real door. 3 years later, 21 Jump Street made Johnny a national television star, but fame packaged and mass-produced soon left him disillusioned. He begged the producers to release him from his contract, telling them bluntly, "I feel like a product, not a person." From then on, Johnny deliberately sought out roles that were strange, fractured, and imperfect, because that was the only way he felt truly alive. Then in 1990, a life-changing moment arrived. Tim Burton invited Johnny to audition for Edward Scissorhands. Johnny entered the audition room without saying much. But when he stepped into the skin of a lonely soul with scissors for hands, it took the director only 10 minutes to realize, this is Edward. When the film premiered, the theater fell into a hush. Audiences didn't just watch Edward Scissorhands. They felt the isolation, the vulnerability, the honesty that Johnny poured into every glance, every breath. The boy once seen as strange now moved millions to tears. Edward Scissorhands grossed over $86 million and became one of the biggest films of the year. And Johnny Depp was officially recognized as a top-tier actor in Hollywood. Soon after, major studios like Warner Bros. And Paramount came calling not for his looks, but for his artistry. His paycheck jumped from a few thousand to millions of dollars per film. He began negotiating rare contracts with one critical clause: freedom to choose his roles. That kind of reward isn't given to those who rise quickly. It's reserved for those who dare to stay true to themselves, no matter the pressure or the risk. So, how did a young man who once sold pens over the phone become an icon who would force Hollywood to rethink its idea of a leading man? The answer lies at the height of his career, where a staggering fortune would also begin to take shape. From the boy who once curled up in a friend's car, Johnny Depp would go on to own a kingdom, not of crowns, but of freedom, talent, and worldwide admiration. After Edward Scissorhands, Johnny Depp became irreplaceable. But it was his decision to take on the role of Captain Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean that elevated him to an entirely new level. The film became a global phenomenon, and Johnny, once an edgy artist, transformed into a cultural icon, launching a franchise that eventually grossed over $45 billion worldwide. When Pirates of the Caribbean premiered in 2003, few expected that a character many thought odd and foolish would make history. Johnny turned a pirate into a cinematic legend, not with muscle, but with a swaying stride, a mischievous gleam in his eye, and the wild heart of a lost boy. The film brought in over $654 million globally. Johnny earned an Oscar nomination, won a Golden Globe, and unofficially but unmistakably became a bona fide box office magnet. His personal earnings from the franchise, including a share of the profits, are estimated at over $300 million, placing him among the highest-paid actors in the world. Yet, instead of living the typical Hollywood superstar lifestyle, Johnny chose a path that surprised everyone: eccentric, untamed, artistic, and unlike anyone else. Exploring the estates and cars of Hollywood's most unconventional star. For Johnny Depp, a home isn't a trophy to be displayed, it's a place to disappear. And every property he chose, whether in France or the US, holds its own kind of quiet set, far apart from the chaos of stardom. The village in southern France, Plan de la Tour. In the early 2000s, after the success of Pirates, Johnny purchased nearly 37 acres of land in southern France, reportedly worth over $13 million, not a gleaming mansion, but a cluster of restored 19th-century stone cottages that once housed farmers. He preserved the original architecture, adding only what was needed to turn it into a haven for creativity: a private recording studio, a swimming pool surrounded by olive trees, a tiny chapel, and hidden garden corners where he would read or strum his guitar. It wasn't just a residence, it was where he said, I come back to myself. Penthouse collection at the Eastern Columbia Building, Los Angeles. Back in the U.S., Johnny owned a series of penthouses at the Eastern Columbia Building, a historic Art Deco landmark in downtown L.A. valued at over $12 million rather than merging them into one massive unit. He kept them separate, one for art, another for his vintage guitar collection, and one serving as his personal library overlooking Broadway. The decor wasn't lavish, it was soulful. Walls adorned with paintings from friends, worn couches, salvaged from film sets, and soft golden lighting that made you feel like you were stepping into a world he had dreamed into existence. Private Island, Little Halls Pond, Cay, Bahamas. One of Johnny's most remarkable properties was a 45-acre private island in the Bahamas, purchased for around $36 million no-luxury resort. Just a few wooden cabins, a small dock, untouched coral reefs and beaches named after his loved ones. He would bring his children there every summer. No paparazzi, no bodyguards, only the ocean of guitar and the simple kind of life that seemed almost forgotten elsewhere. Though he eventually sold the island, the spirit of the place remains deeply tied to his story. Johnny once said in an interview, "The places I live are where I don't have to perform, where I can just be." While some choose homes to project power, Johnny chose sanctuaries to find peace. And that's why, despite all his wealth, he still feels somehow approachable. Not because he's simple, but because everything he has, he chose for a reason that mattered. A unique and eccentric car collection. Johnny never needed flashy supercars to prove his worth. The vehicles he drove weren't loud, weren't polished for cameras, but each one carried a piece of time art and soul. First among them, and perhaps the most beloved, is a deep burgundy 1959 Chevrolet Corvette C1, complete with original chrome trim and vintage leather interior. A gift from the producers of The Rum Diary, valued at over $100,000, but it's no museum piece. Johnny truly drives it along the lavender fields of France, savoring a slower rhythm that most have long forgotten. Then there's his 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback matte, black modified for sound with an analog setup connected to a vinyl player. He would blast classic rock as he cruised Sunset Boulevard market value today, somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000, but Johnny's custom version is considered priceless by collectors. He also used a classic ash gray Range Rover to attend film festivals. No custom paint, no gold-plated trim, not chosen to impress, but to disappear quietly into the background when he wished. Johnny didn't collect cars to fill garages. Each one traveled with him through a chapter of his life. When others picked cars to show off, Johnny chose his to hold memories and to journey toward places few others dared to go. Lavish yet singular passions. Johnny doesn't collect diamonds, he collects Barbie dolls, but not the usual ones, only rare, limited editions, including one handmade Jack Sparrow Barbie, gifted by a fan. He also owns over 70 vintage guitars once played by legends like Keith Richards and Les Paul, all housed in a soundproof room within his main penthouse. An artist's life, living like he never became famous. When not acting, Johnny paints portraits, plays with the Hollywood vampires alongside Alice Cooper and Joe Perry, and performs in front of thousands in Europe, still carrying the spirit of a garage band kid rather than a global film icon. Financial network and private investments. Johnny founded Infinitum Nihil, a production company where he controls the creative process behind his personal projects. He even funded a documentary about his late friend, Hunter S. Thompson, keeping his promise. I'll tell your story the way you wanted it told. Shopped, how does a beloved star become the center of controversy and rise again stronger than ever? In 2016, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard announced their divorce. Shortly afterward, Amber accused Johnny of domestic abuse. Though she never mentioned his name directly, her 2018 op-ed in The Washington Post turned public attention squarely toward Johnny. He faced criticism, doubt, and a wave of people turning away from him. For many older fans who had admired Johnny since the days of Edward Scissorhands and Pirates of the Caribbean, it was a true shock. How could the man known for his private artistic life become embroiled in such a complex legal battle? Johnny said little publicly, but in 2019 he officially filed a defamation lawsuit against Amber Heard seeking $50 million in damages. The civil trial held publicly in 2022 stretched over several weeks and captured the world's attention. Unlike the fiery scenes often seen in Hollywood, Johnny appeared in court, calm, quiet, and patient, listening carefully to each testimony, even as many detailed some of the darkest days of his life. In the end, the court ruled in Johnny Depp's favor, ordering Amber Heard to pay $135 million in damages. At that moment, Johnny did not celebrate. Instead, he bowed his head and thanked those who had trusted and stood by him, a gesture that deeply moved many, especially those who had followed his career for decades. But before the victory came significant loss. In 2017, Johnny Depp sued his former financial management firm, alleging mismanagement that led to severe financial losses. According to public documents, he had spent around $650 million between 2003 and 2016, primarily on real estate staff security artwork and the vast operational costs of life as a global superstar. To stabilize his finances, Johnny was forced to sell several major assets, including his private island in the Bahamas and part of his penthouse collection in Los Angeles. But rather than hide from his mistakes, he openly acknowledged them and began adjusting his lifestyle toward a simpler focus, music painting, and time with family. During this period, Johnny also went public with his efforts to address struggles with alcohol and prescription medication, admitting that he had gone through a period of losing control under the weight of stress and pressure. But he did not cast blame. He simply said, "It was something I had to face, and I'm starting over." His return to public life did not begin on the movie screen. It began with a brand that had stood by him for years, Dior. Shortly after the trial, Johnny renewed his partnership to promote Dior's Sauvage fragrance. Reportedly for a deal exceeding $20 million, one of the largest contracts ever awarded to a male actor. The audience reaction was overwhelming. Marketing campaigns spread across social media, shared millions of times. The fragrance sold out in many countries, and the name Johnny Depp was once again on everyone's lips, this time not for scandal, but for resilience and return. After everything, people no longer saw Johnny simply as an actor. They saw a man who had fallen, had made mistakes, but never gave up. A man who stood up again with calm dignity, without casting blame, without seeking the spotlight. So how does someone once abandoned by the world become a symbol of resilience and redemption? Perhaps the rest of the answer lies in what he left behind, the roles he played, the quiet actions he took, and a spirit that refused to be broken. How does someone who once lost everything leave behind a legacy the world holds dear? After the lawsuits and a string of public setbacks, many believed Johnny Depp would quietly disappear from the entertainment world. But the reality turned out to be very different. He didn't just return, he came back in a way that made people see him through an entirely new lens. One of the most touching moments came when Johnny appeared at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, dressed as Captain Jack Sparrow, to visit children undergoing treatment. There were no cameras following him, no press events scheduled. He simply showed up. When Johnny, in full Jack Sparrow costume, knelt down and gently took the hand of a young boy battling cancer, the child's shy but radiant smile was the greatest gift of all. A nurse later shared, "Many of the kids didn't even know who Johnny Depp was, but they all knew Jack Sparrow, and they laughed the entire day because of him." Beyond hospital visits, Johnny also quietly supported educational causes. One of these was the American Indian College Fund, an organization providing scholarships for Native American students. According to multiple reports, Johnny contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to the fund over more than a decade, helping many young people from underserved communities achieve their dreams of a college education. For many longtime fans, those who had followed him since the days of Edward Scissorhands, these quiet acts of kindness are what make Johnny truly beloved. No big announcements, no press releases, just action and letting the results speak for themselves. After overcoming scandal, Johnny didn't rush back into blockbuster films. Instead, he chose a project few expected, directing Modigliani, a film about Amedeo Modigliani, a painter once rejected by society, but celebrated long after his death. For Johnny, this wasn't just another artistic venture, it was a personal resurrection, a way to tell the story of a misunderstood soul, much like his own. In the eyes of many, Johnny Depp's greatest legacy isn't just the unforgettable characters he brought to life. Jack Sparrow, Edward Scissorhands, characters that have become cultural icons. It's the way he continued to contribute quietly to the world around him, even when he himself was facing difficult times. Johnny reminds us that no matter how harsh life may get, kindness and perseverance will always leave a lasting mark. You don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be universally praised, you just have to keep moving forward on your own terms. So how does a boy who once slept in a friend's car leave behind a legacy that the world treasures? Perhaps the answer lies in the way he lived, not just through fame, but through sincerity. Share your story in the comments, and let's continue spreading kindness together.